People always romanticize urban exploring. They see the Instagram shots, ivy crawling over shattered windows, sunlight pouring through dust motes, the aesthetic of decay. What they do not see the part nobody posts is the smell. That mix of rot, damp concrete, and the faint temps of moldy insulation. I knew all of that when I said yes to Mark's message. Got a spot for tonight. Old Alderich Textile Mill. Supposed to be abandoned since the 80s. Abandoned buildings were our thing. Photos, stories, adrenaline. I craved the adrenaline most. We parked under a broken street lamp. At the edge of town, the mill loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette against a moonless sky. Every window was black, every door chained except for a loose panel on the loading dock. The silence around the building was thick, like even the crickets avoided it. Place looks dead, Mark whispered, slinging his camera bag over his shoulder. Yeah, I said, though the hairs on my arms were already standing on end. The dock door groaned as we pried it open. Inside, pitch darkness, colder than the night air. Our flashlights carved narrow tunnels of light through dust that glittered like tiny, suspended stars. The first floor was what you would expect trusted machinery. Graffiti, puddles reflecting our beams. But something felt off. It was too clean in places. Whole stretches of floor lacked dust entirely, like they had been swept recently. Maintenance crews? Maybe, Mark offered. His voice sounded too loud. On a condemned building, I said. But my laugh was forced. As we moved deeper, we found signs of life where there should have been none. A coffee mug on a table, still half full, a coat draped neatly over a chair, a faint smell of cigarette smoke. We looked at each other. Squatters, Mark mouthed. I nodded, though my stomach twisted. Squatters leave messes. This was orderly. Then came the sound, a faint metallic clink from somewhere below, rhythmic, deliberate, like someone working a wrench. Mark's eyes lit up. Could be pipes settling. But he tightened his grip on the flashlight. We descended a stairwell into the basement. The temperature dropped instantly, and our breaths fogged. The concrete walls here were unmarked, no graffiti, no dust, and the clink was louder. When we reached the bottom, we saw something that made my skin crawl. A hallway lit by a single bare bulb. The light was weak, flickering, but unmistakably powered. Mark whispered, "Abandoned, huh?" We crept forward, the bulb swinging slightly as if disturbed by a breeze. The hallway led to a heavy steel door that stood slightly ajar. Beyond it, voices. Low, urgent whispers we couldn't quite make out. Mark motioned to retreat, but curiosity had its claws in me. I edged closer until I could see through the crack. Inside was a room that should not exist in a forgotten textile mill. Gleaming stainless steel counters, surgical lights, rows of monitors flickering with static. A figure in a white lab coat stood with their back to us, tapping on a tablet. Another figure told to, then shifted in the shadows. The whispers stopped. The tall figure turned its head not all the way, not like a human would, but farther, until its face, if you could call it, that aligned with the door crack. I didn't see eyes, just a pale blur where features should be. And then a voice, smooth, close, though the thing hadn't moved, spoke directly into my ear. Explorers should not trespass here. My blood froze. I yanked Mark's sleeve, and we ran, flashlights bouncing, back up the stairs. But the building was different. Now the hallways didn't match. The doors were sealed. And behind us, soft footsteps followed, unhurried but relentless. We hit the top of the stairwell, hearts pounding, lungs burning, but the loading dark door, the one we'd slipped through, was no longer there. The wall was seamless concrete now, as if it had never existed. Mark swore under his breath. We came this way. We did. I wanted to believe him, but the hallway stretched in both directions, unfamiliar and wrong. The air was heavier here, stale like a room sealed for decades. My flashlight beam shook as I swept it across walls that seemed closer than they had been before. A distant metallic clink echoed again, but slower now, deliberate. It was not random. It was a signal. Left or right? Mark asked, his voice a dry rasp. Right. I didn't know why I said it. Only that going left felt like walking straight into a trap. We walked, our shoes scuffing against the concrete, the sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. Graffiti appeared again on the walls, except these were not tags or doodles. They were warnings. Leave. Not safe. Don't look at them. The last one was smeared in what looked like rust. I told myself it was rust. We turned a corner and stopped dead. The hallway ahead was lined with doors, each identical, each padlocked except for the third on the left. It hung slightly open. Maybe it's a way out, Mark whispered. I shook my head. Too easy. But even as I said it, I felt a pull like the room itself wanted us inside. We stepped through. It was an office, or it had been once. A metal desk, a cracked leather chair, and a filing cabinet tipped on its side. But the strangest part was the fresh cup of coffee steaming on the desk. Mark reached for it, then stopped when we both heard it. The sound of breathing. Not ours, something deeper, wetter, just beyond the desk. I swung my light toward the corner. For a split second, I saw movement. Something tall unfolding itself from the shadows, but when the beam landed, the corner was empty. Mark's voice shook. I think they're moving when we're not looking. A crush. The steel doors in the hallway were slamming shut one by one, the echoes rolling toward us like thunder. We bolted back into the hall, But the row of doors had changed, where there had been 5 on each side. Now there were 7, and the padlocks were gone. They all stood ajar, blackness yawning inside each one. A faint whisper threaded through the darkness. "Choose." Mark grabbed my arm. "Don't listen. Just pick one and run." I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to freeze. We darted into the nearest doorway, the whisper following us like a breath on the back of my neck. The room beyond was impossibly large, far larger than the building's footprint. Dust swirled in our flashlight beams like ash, and in the center of the floor stood an old elevator cage, its accordion gate half open. Inside, a single red button glowed faintly. Mark hesitated. "We don't know where it goes." "Anywhere is better than here," I said, though I was not sure I believed it. We stepped inside. The gate screeched as we pulled it shut. Mark pressed the button. The elevator groaned to life, rattling and shaking as it descended down, and down, and down. The air grew colder, and with each passing second, the metallic clink grew louder, surrounding us. Then the elevator stopped with a lurch. The gate slid open on its own, revealing a corridor lit by flickering fluorescent lights. A sign on the wall read, "Research level, authorized personnel only." Somewhere ahead, footsteps approached slow, deliberate, and getting closer. The corridor stretched impossibly far, the flickering lights making it feel like a stuttering film reel. Mark and I pressed ourselves against the cold cinder block wall, straining to listen. The footsteps were measured, unhurried, and most unsettling compounded by a faint scraping sound, like something heavy dragged across the floor. When the lights flickered again, the hallway seemed shorter, the footsteps closer. Mark whispered, "We need to move now." I nodded. We darted forward, the squeak of our shoes echoing in the sterile space. Ahead, we spotted a heavy security door with a small wired glass window, a faded sign above it. "Read observation deck." Through the window, we could see rows of observation booths overlooking a vast chamber. The walls were lined with industrial catwalks, and dangling cables snaked down into darkness. On the far wall, a rusted sign still clung, Alderich Textile Sublevel 3. The textile mill had never been abandoned. It had been repurposed. Inside the deck, papers were scattered across the floor, handwritten notes, printed reports, and Polaroids yellowed with age. Mark picked one up. The image was grainy but clear enough. A group of people in lab coats standing beside something draped under a tarp. On the back, in smudged ink, someone had written, "It won't stay contained. Stop feeding it." A low hum vibrated through the floor, so deep it rattled my teeth. We peered through the booth's cracked glass into the chamber below. Something moved. It was massive. At first, only a shifting shadow against the far wall, then a limta. Long, jointed, rung, unfolded. The cables on the ceiling trembled as the thing's outline took shape. A towering, skinless form like a mannequin carved from raw muscle. It tilted its faceless head, as though sniffing the air. A voice not from the chamber, not from Marsh, spoke inside my skull. "You are not staff." I staggered back. Mark's face had gone pale. Did you hear?" Before he could finish, the overhead lights flared, then died, plunging everything into a suffocating black. We bolted out of the observation deck, fumbling through the corridor, the hum growing louder. Behind us, metal groaned as something huge shifted its weight. We passed another door, this one labeled the staff quarters restricted. It stood slightly open. Against every instinct, we glanced inside. Bunks lined the walls, personal effects still on the shelves, watches, boots, Polaroid pictures of smiling families. But the bed sheets were rumpled, still indented as if the occupants had left only moments ago. "Mark," I whispered, "this place, they never left." His flashlight beam quivered. "Then where are they?" A creak answered us from somewhere above. Dust rained down. We ducked into the next hallway, only to find it ending in another steel door. This one bore a warning scrawled in red. "They walk with you now." A distant clink echoed again, closer than before. Suddenly, the corridor behind us filled with a faint, sickly light. Figures were stepping into view. Their outlines were human, but blurred, as though my eyes refused to focus on them. Their movements were wrong, gurky, stuttering, like film frames out of sync. One of them tilted its head the exact same way the thing in the chamber had. Mark hissed. "They're copying us." We sprinted. Doors on either side of the hall banged open and closed, as though the building itself were reacting. At the end, a stairwell spiraled downward. We took it 2 steps at a time, the hum now a roar in our bones. At the bottom, we found ourselves in a control room. Consoles blinked weakly. Screens showed static. A dusty clipboard on the desk listed a schedule. Feeding 2 o'clock. Observation. 4 o'clock extraction. 6 o'clock. And beneath it, a scrawled note in frantic handwriting. "Do not let it learn your names." My blood ran cold. The thing had already whispered to me. Then came a sound that made every muscle in my body lock up. My own voice, echoing from somewhere deeper in the facility, calling Mark's name. Mark's eyes widened. "That was you?" We stared into the black doorway beyond the consoles, the air trembling with our ragged breaths. Somewhere ahead, I or something wearing my voice was still calling. The voice echoed again, warping against the walls of the control room. "Mark." This way, hearing your own voice coming from somewhere it should not be does something to you. It felt like my stomach turned to ice. Mark backed toward the consoles, shaking his head. "We're not following that. We do not have another way out," I whispered. Even as I said it, I hated myself for suggesting it. But every door we had tried had vanished or led us deeper. The mill was alive, and it was hurting us. We stepped through the black doorway beyond the consoles. The corridor beyond was narrower, the concrete walls wet as though we were inside some enormous throat. Water dripped steadily, echoing like distant footsteps. Our flashlights flickered, their beams bending unnaturally as if the darkness itself was swallowing the light. The hallway opened suddenly into a cavernous chamber that could not physically exist beneath a textile mill. Rusted catwalks spiraled downward toward a pit. Chains dangled like vines. The hum we had heard for so long now pulsed like a heartbeat, shaking the metal under our feet. In the center of the pit was a massive steel cage split open, as if something had torn its way out. Shards of metal curled outward like petals of a monstrous flower. Scrawled on the nearest railing in what looked like dried blood were the words, "Don't run I. T follows faster." Mark gripped my arm. "We should go back." The hum surged, drowning out my reply. Then the whisper returned to my voice. "But wrong. Closer. I need you closer." We descended the catwalk, each step groaning under our weight. The lower we went, the warmer the air became, thick and foul like breath on our necks. At the base of the pit, the floor was slick. Dark stains trailed from the ruined cage toward a tunnel at the far end. There, under the flicker of a dying light, stood a figure. At first, I thought it was a man. It wore what might have been a lab coat, tattered and dark with age. But as it turned, I realized it had no face, just a stretched, featureless expanse of flesh, where eyes should have been. Two hollow depressions wept thin streams of black fluid. It lifted a human hand, but with too many joints, and beckoned. Mark whispered, "It knows we're here." Suddenly, the walls around us groaned, and the steel cage pieces twitched like they were alive. The hum became a chorus of overlapping whispers. "Feed. Replace. Remember." The faceless thing began to walk toward us, each step a jerking lurch that bent its limbs backward like watching a puppet with cut strings. The air grew crushingly heavy. Mark raised his flashlight like a weapon. "Stay back." The thing stopped. It tilted its head the exact same tilt we had seen before and whispered, perfectly mimicking Mark's voice, "Stay back." I felt my mind splinter at the sound. The hum spiked. The chains hanging above rattled violently. And then one by one the silhouettes of other figures appeared on the catwalks above us. They were copies of us. Our bodies, our clothes, our movements stuttering slightly, but unmistakably us. One of me stepped forward on a higher platform and spoke in my voice, but in a flat, wrong cadence. "You are late for your shift." Mark grabbed my wrist. "Run." We bolted for the tunnel beyond the pit. Behind us, the duplicates moved in perfect sync, their footsteps echoing like a drum beat. The faceless thing did not chase it, simply watched, head cocked, as though satisfied we were running exactly where it wanted us. The tunnel led to another staircase spiraling upward. We climbed, gasping, the hum fading slightly but never disappearing. The stairs ended at a heavy fire door marked main floor exit. Mark pushed it open, and we stumbled into what looked like the original textile floor rows of silent looms and broken windows letting in a weak moonlight. Relief washed over me. Maybe we had finally circled back to where we began. Then one of the looms clicked. Another followed. The noise cascaded across the floor as every machine began to operate, weaving invisible threads in perfect unison. And then, from the far side of the room, my voice called again, cheerful this time, almost sing-song. "Over here." Found the way out, but I was standing right there. Mark turned to me, horror dawning. "If you're here, then..." The loom nearest us shuddered violently, threads snapping. Something pale and jointed slithered out from underneath, too fast for my light to catch. The hum roared back, deafening now. The roar of the looms was unbearable, an industrial heartbeat pounding in my skull. Threads snapped and tangled like veins across the floor. Mark grabbed my sleeve and pointed to a stairwell at the far corner. A rusted sign above it promised exit in faded red paint. We sprinted, weaving between clattering machines that seemed to reach for us with belts and broken spindles. The smell of hot oil and ozone filled my nose, thick enough to choke. Behind us, something pale darted from loom to loom, never giving us a full glimpse, only flickers. A bent limb here, a faceless curve there. Mark wrenched the stairwell door open, and we bolted upward 2 steps at a time. The pounding hum faded, replaced by a steady drip, drip, drip echoing off narrow walls. Halfway up, I glanced back. The doorway below us had vanished, only blank concrete remained. At the top of the stairwell was a long hallway flooded with moonlight from broken windows. Outside, I could see the town, real. Familiar skyline like salvation dangling just out of reach. We ran for the end of the hall where a set of double doors stood wide open. The cool night air wafted through, carrying the distant sounds of traffic. Mark laughed half-crazed relief. We made it! The hum surged. The open doors slammed shut with a thunderous clang. The moonlight vanished, leaving us in total black. My flashlight flickered back to life on its own. The hallway was gone. In its place stretched the observation deck from below, but warped. Windows cracked into spiderweb patterns. The pit beyond twisting like a living wound. The cage in the center was whole again, waiting. Figures stepped from the shadows, our duplicates. 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 of me. Their smiles were too wide, their eyes unfocused, as if painted on. They whispered in overlapping tones. Stay. Finish your shift. We need you to replace them. One of my copies stepped closer, its movements jerky and wrong. It held out its hand. On its palm was a keeled brass, marked with the mill's insignia. Mark shook his head. Do not take it. But the hum pressed against my skull like a migraine. A sudden, clear thought pierced through. The only way out is through the role they built for you. I took the key. The duplicates melted back into the shadows. The observation deck shimmered and dissolved, revealing a single, ordinary steel door ahead. Its small window glowed faintly with warm daylight. Mark gripped my shoulder. If this is another trick, it is all we have, I said. We stepped through. Daylight blinded me. The air was fresh, birdsong bright and innocent. We were outside back on the cracked pavement where we had parked. Our car was right there, dew glistening on the hood. Mark whooped with relief, fumbling for the keys. We're out, man! Where? He froze. The car keys in his hand had melted, metal dripping like wax. The buildings across the street were wrong, their windows were blank walls, their shapes distorted. A billboard overhead flickered between different messages. Alderich Textile Research Division. Stay in line. Stay in line, until it was just static. Behind us, the mill's loading dock door groaned open by itself. From the darkness inside, my voice again called out in a cheerful sing-song. Come on back. You forgot something. The world around us shivered. The pavement cracked like thin ice, and underneath, I saw catwalks and cables the pit, waiting below the skin of reality. Mark backed away, whispering, "We never left. We never." The hum returned soft now, almost tender. It wrapped around my thoughts like a lullaby. In that moment, I understood. The mill was not a place. It was a system, a machine that could mimic reality itself, a trap that wore the skin of the world. We could run forever and still be inside it. The last thing I saw before the pavement folded inward like paper was a single loom standing in the middle of the street, weaving invisible thread in perfect, endless loops. Then the lights went out.